Barakatah Yahweh, Barakatah Yahweh Shai. Today's lesson is going to be a misconception that Jake has in pretty much in America today, and they try to use scripture in Genesis 15 and Acts 7 speak about 400 years of slavery, and they try to say that that's dealing with America because the so-called Negroes, West Indians, and Haitians were brought to the soils of America, and the bulk of them in 1619, and that 2019 marks the 400-year anniversary of them coming to this country, and that the scripture in Genesis 15 and Acts 7 justify that they're going to be let out of slavery by the year 2019. And that's not true, because I was talking to Brother Pashai earlier. I was mentioning that to him, and he brought out a good point. You know, that the so-called Latin tribes, Native American Indian tribes, was already on this side of the world, and they went into slavery pretty much before Jake was brought over here to this side of the world. So that doesn't fit. That prophecy doesn't fit, because that 400 years of slavery is not talking about the time that you would spend in slavery in America, because first and foremost, all 12 tribes weren't in slavery at that time, because the other tribes were in slavery prior to that. You know, so that 400-year period goes back during the time when we were in the land of Egypt. You know, and we're gonna do a short lesson on it. You know, Apostle Tahar has done videos on it. Other brothers have done videos on it. You know, and pretty much just gonna hit those scriptures and show you that it's not talking about America. It's talking about ancient Egypt. All right. So the first scripture I want to go to, and this right here, says if they claim, this is a picture I found online. If they claim a God that told Moses to go tell Pharaoh, let my people go, why don't they ever mention your 400 years of slavery? Black Hebrew Israelites. And we're not black Hebrew Israelites. We're just Hebrew Israelites, because you have Israelites. There's no such thing as there's no such thing as black people. Okay. That's a term or a color that the so-called white man put upon a nation of people, and they're not black. They're brown. You know, you try to tell that to the average so-called Negro out there, the tribe of Judah, or any of the tribes, or many of the tribe of Judah, they'll look at you like you're crazy. What you mean I ain't black? You ain't black. You're brown. You know? Anyway, so this is a picture I found online, and a lot of you false prophets out there, you are that know that you're Israelites, that are using that scripture that try to justify that's talking about America. The Lord's gonna deal with you, man, because you know, you got people making comments, you know, women, of course, and others putting comments on comment boards talking about that the 400 years of slavery are almost up. In 2019, the 400 years is up. That's all bull crap. All right, you know, we're hoping that the Lord bring us out of here as soon as possible. You know, it's December 25th, 2016. 6 days before the turn of the year to 2017, and we're hoping that 2017 comes in with a bang and the Lord delivers us out of here. You know, to hell with some 2019. We talking about now, the here and now. All right. So the first scripture I want to go to is Acts 7, because they try to use this to justify that madness. Okay. This is I just started the first verse. The point is around the 7th verse, I believe it is. Acts 7:1. This is Stephen giving an oration of what took place in the history that led up to explaining that Moses and our forefathers spoke about the Messiah, Yahweh Shai. Acts 7:1. Then said the high priest, are these things so? And he said, men, brethren, and fathers, hearken. The power of glory appeared unto our father Abraham when he was in Mesopotamia, before he dwelt in Haran. Let me see if I could pull that up real quick. All right, images. All right, here you have picture of ancient Mesopotamia, which is in this region here. You know, all this region here was ancient Mesopotamia. And then as you go this way, it's at the borderline of Turkey, Syria, depending on what map you go to. And that was Haran, or Haran. All right, because the Lord told Abraham to leave Ur of the Chaldees, and he dwelt in the land of Haran, which was where I believe it was called after his brother that died. All right, then they went down to the land of Canaan, which is today known as the land of Israel, and then he went down into Egypt. Okay, and the Lord had him do that because the Lord was showing him the land that he was going to give him. And the land of Israel stems from around this region here in Egypt, around here, all the way up to around the Tigris River or so. So all this land here really belongs to us. You know, that's going to be our inheritance. All right, so this is what Stephen was speaking about. All right, so it says, when he was in Mesopotamia, before he dwelt in Haran, and said unto him, Get thee out of thy country and from thy kindred, and come into the land which I shall show thee. Then came he out of the land of the Chaldeans and dwelt in Haran. And from thence, when his father was dead, he removed him into this land, wherein you now dwell. All right, so this is Stephen speaking to the Israelites that were there, that said, look, the Lord moved Abraham out of where he was at, and now and brought him here to where the land that you're now living in. This is you are the people that the Lord promised that the Lord promised to give this land to, which are the descendants of Abraham. And he gave him none inheritance in it, no, not so much as to set his foot on. Yet he promised that he would give it to him for a possession, and to his seed after him, when as yet he had no child. And the Most High spake on this wise, that his seed, such this is the point here. And the Most High spake on this wise, that his seed, whose seed? Abraham's seed. Now Abraham had how many seeds? Abraham had 8 seeds. So which one of those seeds did the Lord choose to give this inheritance to? The seed came through Isaac, and then it came down through Jacob. And Jacob had the 12 patriarchs, which later became the 12 tribes of the nation of Israel. Okay, so that's where the inheritance went to. So that his seed, singular, should sojourn in a strange land, which that strange land that they sojourned in was the land of Egypt. It's not talking about America. And that they should bring them into bondage, meaning into captivity, into slavery, and entreat them evil 400 years. And seeing that their so-called 400-year mark is coming up in 2019, they try to apply this to that. And that's not what it's talking about, because the other tribes are already in slavery on this side of the world prior to Judah, Benjamin, and Levi, or the southern kingdom, coming over here to the Americas in bondage. Okay, and it goes on to say, and the nation to whom they shall be in bondage will I judge, saith the Most High, and after that shall they come forth and serve me in this place. So they're thinking that these 2 verses here in Acts 7, verses 6 and 7, is talking about the captivity of America, but it's not. So let's go back to Genesis 15, where Stephen actually quoted this passage from. Acts 15, I'll start at 1. And these things, after these things, the word of the Lord came unto Abram in a vision, saying, Fear not, Abram, I am thy shield and thy exceeding great reward. And Abram said, Lord power, what wilt thou give me, seeing I go childless, and the steward of my house is this Eliezer of Damascus? And Abram said, Behold, to me thou hast given no seed, and lo, one born in mine house is mine heir. And behold, the word of the Lord came unto him, saying, This shall not be thine heir, but he that shall come forth out of thine own bowels shall be thine heir. And he brought him forth abroad, and said, Look now toward the heaven, and tell the stars, if thou be able to number them. And he said unto him, So shall thy seed be. And he believed the Lord, Yahweh, and he counted it to him for righteousness. That's where Paul quoted that from. And he said unto him, I am Yahweh that brought thee out of Ur of the Chaldees, which we saw here. This is Ur of the Chaldees here, all right, in Babylon. It says, to give thee this land to inherit it. What land? The land of Canaan, which later became the land of Israel. After he left there, came up to Haran, and then came down into this land. All right. It says, and he said, Lord power, whereby shall I know that I shall inherit it? And he said unto him, take me an heifer of 3 years old. Okay, this goes into the sacrifice. So now we're going to jump down to the 12th verse, right? And when the sun was going down, a deep sleep fell upon Abram, and lo, an horror of great darkness fell upon him. And he said unto Abram, know of a surety that thy seed, once again, thy seed singular, shall be a stranger. See, and the word stranger here is gar. In this matter of fact, stranger, see, gar, which is a sojourner, shall be a stranger in a land that is not theirs. What land was that? The land of Egypt. And shall serve them, and they shall afflict them 400 years. See, so that 400-year period, which spoken of in the book of Genesis 15, which Stephen quoted, was talking about in the land of Egypt. Now check it out. And also that nation whom they shall serve, which were the Egyptians, will I judge. Did not the Most High judge the Egyptians? You know, he drowned Pharaoh and his armies in the Red Sea, in the to be more precise, in the Gulf of Suez. Okay, and afterwards shall they come out with great substance. Now we're going to deal with that great substance in the next scripture we go to. And thou shalt go to thy fathers in peace, thou shalt be buried in a good old age. But in the 4th generation they shall come hither again, for the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet full. Now the Amorites are Canaanites. Now when you go back to the beginning, in the beginning, all right, when you go back to the beginning, when it was Noah, it was Shem, Ham, Japheth, and Ham's son Canaan, right? This is what happened. And this is Genesis 9:24. And Noah awoke from his wine and knew what his younger son had done unto him, which is Ham. And he said, cursed be Canaan, which Canaan was the son of Ham. A servant of servants shall he be unto his brethren. Now, why did Noah curse Canaan? Because eventually the Most High knew that Canaan, the son Canaan, was gonna inherit all this land here. Let me see if I could get a picture of here you go, Canaan, right? And here you got Canaanites. So you had the Canaanites, the Perizzites, the Jebusites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Girgashites, the Hivites. They were inhabiting all these lands here, right? So Noah, when Ham went in and saw his father's nakedness and went back to his brothers Shem and Japheth and made mockery of it, Shem and Japheth went in backwards with a sheet over them to cover their father's nakedness, so they didn't look on their father's nakedness. So Noah, being a prophet, when he woke up because he was drunk, because he was happy, because the Lord delivered him out of that great flood, that a great deluge, so to speak, that the Lord killed every living thing on the planet Earth except for 8 souls. So Noah was ecstatic that the Lord had finally washed away that water and set them back on land. And the land that he set them back on was on Mount Ararat. All right, Mount Ararat. Let's see if they'll give you a picture of the map right here, which was in Turkey. See, Mount Ararat, which is right in this region, close to Armenia, right in this area, the mountains right there. So he was happy, that happened. So when he got drunk and his son Ham saw his nakedness and started ridiculing him, he said, cursed be Canaan, a servant shall it be unto his brethren. And the reason why he was cursed, reason why he didn't curse Ham and he cursed directly Canaan, was because this land of Canaan was going to eventually be given to the nation of Israel as an inheritance. All right, so they were the first inhabitants of this land. All right, it says, and he said, blessed be the Lord, power of Shem, and Canaan shall be his servant. See, the Most High shall enlarge Japheth, and he shall dwell in the tents of Shem, and Canaan shall be his servant. All right, so going back to Genesis 15, But in the fourth generation they shall come hither again, for the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet full. Because what happened was the Most High sent Joseph into Egypt, which his brothers sold him into Egypt because they were envious of him. And when they sold him into Egypt, they were doing it to get rid of him because they were envious of him. But the Lord had a greater purpose, because Joseph found great favor in the land of Egypt. You know, he even became the second in command underneath the Pharaoh. You know, and that was and then the Lord gave him dreams to interpret for the Pharaoh, and when he interpreted those dreams for the Pharaoh, he told him about the 7 years of plenteous and the 7 years of famine. And he prepared for the famine so that in all the world, wherever there was a community at, so to speak, that they had to come to Egypt to buy corn, you know? And that's what made Egypt great, was corn. You know, so that the Lord set Joseph up to preserve Israel and the Israelites, you know? Because his brother, their brother being the second in command, of course, you know, he was going to take care of him. All right. So the iniquity of the Amorites was not yet full, meaning that they still had certain wickedness that they had to do for the Lord to kick them out of the land. That's why the Lord said, look, when you go into these lands, don't do after the abomination of these nations, because for that reason that they did those abominations was the very reason why I kicked them out of that land. So don't do that. Don't worship their different gods and customs and all that. Because if you do, the same way I kicked them out, I'm going to kick you out. All right. So once that time of the iniquity of the Amorites or of the Canaanites was full, when it was time for the Lord to finally kick them out the land, it says, and it came to pass that when the sun went down and it was dark, behold, a smoking furnace and a burning lamp that passed between those pieces. In the same day the Lord made a covenant with Abram, saying, unto thy seed have I given this land, from the river of Egypt unto the great river, the river Euphrates. See, so that great land, the Lord gave the nation of Israel from the river of Egypt unto the river of Euphrates. So all this region of land here belongs to us. All right. Going back, it says the Kenites and the Kenizzites and the Cadmonites and the Hittites and the Perizzites and the Rephaim and the Amorites and the Canaanites and the Girgashites and the Jebusites. And those are all nations that were living here in the land of Canaan. It was called Canaan after them. So then when we took over, the land was renamed the land of Israel. Okay? So then from the time that the Lord gave Abraham that dream, that vision, Israel went into the land of Egypt. And as it says in Exodus, the first chapter, there rose up a Pharaoh that knew not Joseph, because Joseph found favor in them, brought the children of Israel in, about 75 souls, I believe it was, and they lived good. But then they started to multiply, and they started to be a vexation to the Egyptians, you know, especially the leaders. Okay. It says, Exodus 1:7, and the children of Israel were fruitful and increased abundantly and multiplied and waxed exceeding mighty, and the land was filled with them. So there were so many Israelites that you couldn't even count the Israelites. So it says that Joseph died, see, but then all his brethren and all that generation. So all those Israelites that went in there, they had died, you know, after a certain point. Then when the new Pharaoh came in, he didn't know Joseph and the great things that he did for Egypt. You know, it says verse 8. In other words, he didn't know Joseph. You know, he knew everything that took place, but he didn't know Joseph personally like the other pharaohs knew him. Now there arose up a new king over Egypt, which knew not Joseph. And he said unto his people, behold, the people of the children of Israel are more mighty than we. Come on, let us deal wisely with them, lest they multiply. And it come to pass that when there falleth out any war, they join also unto our enemies and fight against us, and so get them up out of the land. Therefore they did set over them taskmasters to afflict them with their burdens. And they built for Pharaoh treasure cities, Pithom and Ramesses. But the more they afflicted them, the more they multiplied and grew, and they were grieved because of the children of Israel. And the Egyptians made the children of Israel to serve with rigor. See, this is that bondage. And they made their lives bitter with hard bondage in mortar and in brick and in all manner of service in the field, which all their service wherein they made them serve was with rigor. And that goes pursuant to the dream or the vision that the Lord gave to Abram, that his seed should serve 400 years in the land, in a strange land. All right. Now this is Exodus chapter 12 verse 40. Remember we read in Acts 7 that they came out, I believe it was either Acts 7 or it was either Acts the 7th chapter or Genesis the 15th chapter, where it said that they shall come out with great substance. I believe it was Genesis the 15th chapter, and afterward they shall come out with great substance. You know, I mean, you brothers could look for it. You know, like I said, it's either there or in the other one. Okay. All right, so now let's go to Exodus 12 and 40. Now the sojourning of the children of Israel who dwelt in Egypt was 430 years. Now the 30 years of that time, they weren't in bondage, because you had Joseph, that the Pharaoh knew. You had the patriarchs, Joseph's father, that came in. So you had a period of time where Israel was straight. But once Joseph died, then they put him in slavery, in captivity. You know, so there was a period of time where Israel wasn't doing bad, because their brother Joseph was alive, the Pharaoh that knew him was alive, and they were doing good. You know, they grew great. They grew into a mighty nation. You know, it says, and it came to pass at the end of the 430 years, even the self-same day it came to pass, that all the hosts of the Lord went out from the land of Egypt. Okay, so all Israel came out of the land of Egypt. It is a night to be much observed unto the Lord for bringing them out from the land of Egypt. This is that night of the Lord to be observed of all the children of Israel in their generations. Let me see something. Let me see. Just bear with me 1 second. Okay, let me start at 37. No, I'm sorry. 35. And the children of Israel did according to the word of Moses, and they borrowed of the Egyptians. I'm sorry, 33. And the Egyptians were urgent upon the people that they might send them out of the land in haste, for they said, we be all dead men. Why? Because you had different plagues that came. There's 10 different plagues that came upon the land of Egypt, and the final plague was what? The plague of the firstborn dying. Now, once the firstborn died, then they finally let Israel go, right? It says, and the people took their dough before it was leavened, their kneading trough being bound up in their clothes upon their shoulders. And that's why we eat unleavened bread to this day, because everything was done in haste. And the Passover really is supposed to be eaten in haste. The Passover meal is supposed to be eaten in haste. You know, really supposed to be standing up, girded, with your staff in your hand, and eating, you know, ready to roll, ready to go. You know, it ain't, like Apostle Tar always says, it ain't a lamb dinner. Okay? And the children of Israel did according to the word of Moses, and they borrowed, meaning they ripped off, borrowed of the Egyptians jewels of silver and jewels of gold and raiment, because the Lord said that Israel will come out of there with great substance. And the Lord gave the people favor in the sight of the Egyptians, so that they lent unto them such things as they required, and they spoiled the Egyptians. See, they robbed the Egyptians because they wasn't getting it back. You know, but that was all set up because, you know, for us to be sustained in the wilderness. It says, and the children of Israel journeyed from Ramesses to Succoth, about 600,000 on foot. There were men beside children, and a mixed multitude went up also with them, which they died off, as we read before. Everybody that came with Joseph, that was dealing with Joseph. But then in this time, when they came out with Israel, and this time they were in the wilderness 40 years, and everybody that was in the wilderness with them died off. They came out of Egypt, except for Joshua, Caleb, and the children that came out. And then when they got to the land of Canaan, which was later named Israel, Joshua had to go and recircumcise all the children, because these hard-headed Israelites didn't circumcise their children. It says, and the mixed multitude went up also with them, and eventually that mixed multitude died in the wilderness, and flocks and herds, even very much cattle. And they baked unleavened cakes of the dough which they brought forth out of Egypt, for it was not leavened, because they were thrust out of Egypt, and could not tarry, neither had they prepared for themselves any victuals. Now the sojourning of the children of Israel who dwelt in Egypt was 430 years. So they dwelt there 430 years, but they were afflicted for 400 years. And it came to pass at the end of the 430 years, even the self-same day, it came to pass that all the hosts of the Lord went out from the land of Egypt. It is a night to be much observed unto the Lord for bringing them out from the land of Egypt. This is that night of the Lord to be observed of all the children of Israel in their generations. So Acts the 7th chapter, Genesis the 15th chapter, where it speaks about the 400 years of slavery, is not talking about America. It's talking about ancient Egypt. All right? And when you read the scriptures with understanding, you see that, you know. Now the scriptures do speak about the bondage of America, you know, of all the tribes, you know, but these two scriptures here, Acts 7 and Genesis 15, is not talking about ancient Egypt. It's not talking about America. It was talking about ancient Egypt. Okay? So with that, you know, I hope you brothers been edified. To the next time I say shalom.